will definitely help us and help everyone to better know the anatomy and the surgical approaches to so that they can perform better surgeries. There was a period, there was a time when CP angle surgery was very difficult. It was a game of around 12, 16 hours. But now everything is changed. Now it is done in few hours. And the reason is basically that we know better anatomy, we are having better gadgets, and so results are also better than the previously were done. When we were not having better gadgets and not big knowledge was a limited one. So over to Dr. Afifa. We are already very late, so that we can continue and we can know about anatomy and approaches to CP angle lesions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. So, Dr. Afifa, you can.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, Dr. Ahmed Sharaf. Okay, if you can make it in full screen mode, Dr. Afifa.
All right. Good evening, Ahmed, and I'm really sorry for keeping you guys waiting. And I hope my screen is visible to all of you.
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, it is.
All right. So the topic of our presentation today is cerebellopontine angle anatomy and the relations and the basic surgical approach that we use. So as we all know that the CP angle is basically located between the superior and the inferior limbs of the angular cerebellopontine fissure. So this cerebellopontine fissure is basically formed. Wait here. So the cerebellopontine fissure is basically formed by the petrosal cerebellar surface, which actually tends to fold around the surface of the pons and the middle cerebellar peduncle. The cerebellopontine fissure, as the name suggests, is basically a fissure between the cerebellum and the pons, which tends to open medially and has a superior and an inferior limb, which we are going to see in consecutive slides, that tend to meet at a lateral apex. So this is an angular space that is created, which is known as the CP angle. The cranial nerves from 4th down till the 11th, they are located near or within this angular space between the two superior and the inferior limbs of the cerebellopontine fissure. And that is why this space is termed as the cerebellopontine angle. The trochlea and the trigeminal nerves, which is the 4th and the 5th cranial nerves, are located usually near the fissure's superior limb. And the lower cranial nerve, which includes the cranial nerve 9th, 10th, and 11th, they're located near the inferior limb. The abducent nerve, which is the 6th cranial nerve, tends to be at the base of the fissure, which is basically going to be, there is an imaginary interior line which is connecting the superior and the inferior limbs of the cerebellopontine fissure anteriorly. So the abducent is located further anteromedially. All right, so this is an anterior view, cadaveric section. Now we can appreciate that the proximal surface is basically the pons. Can you guys see the pointer? So superiorly we have the pons. Then this is the medulla, the inferior olivary sulcus. This is the intermedullary sulcus between the two pyramids of the medulla, and we can appreciate the cranial nerves that are arising. So this is from the topmost part of the midbrain, we have the cranial nerve 3, which is arising. Then as we were talking about the cerebellopontine fissure, so this is the fissure that we are talking about. This is the space between the pons and the cerebellum. So this is the petrosal surface of the cerebellum, and we are viewing it from the anterior aspect. So this is the superior limb of the cerebellopontine fissure, and this is the inferior limb of the cerebellopontine fissure, and this is the space, this is the angular space which is called as the CP angle. And here we can trace down the cranial nerve 5, which has a wider root, then the cranial nerve 7, then cranial nerve 8, which is the 7th-8th complex, usually lying very in close proximity to each other. As we were talking about, the cranial nerve 6 arises from the base of the CP angle. So this is the cranial nerve 6, which is basically present at the base and anteriorly. And these are the lower cranial nerves. That's the cranial nerve 9, 10th, and 11th, and the 12th cranial nerve in the form of rootlets. So this was an interior view of the brainstem. Then we have again a comparative view. We have an anterior section and we have a lateral section in order to give a clear orientation. So this was an anterior view like we went through initially, and this is a lateral view that we can appreciate. So on this surface, we can see again, this is the pons, this is medulla, and we are viewing it from one side. So we can see that this is the petrosal surface of the cerebellum that tends to curve and fold around the pons. And this is the superior limb of the cerebellopontine fissure, and this is the inferior limb of the cerebellopontine fissure. So these two limbs are joining at the apex, forming an angular space which is called the CP angle space, and which is harboring all the lower cranial nerves. Here we can appreciate that this is the choroid plexus, which is hanging down from the foramen of Luschka laterally, and which is again lying in close proximity to the glossopharyngeal nerve complex. This is a schematic diagram of the lateral view as we popularly see in the retrosigmoid approach. So, which is the most common and the workhorse approach for addressing the CP angle lesion. So here we see that the retractor has been placed and the cerebellum has been retracted in order to show the connection and the arising of all the cranial nerves from the brainstem. So we see the most wider part and the most proximal nerve is the cranial nerve 5, which is then joining and going to becoming intradural into the space Meckel's cave. This is the pontine surface, so it is arising from the topmost portion of the pons. Excuse me. And this is the 7th-8th nerve complex that can be seen here. This is which is being traced down till the internal acoustic meatus. This is the choroid plexus, which is hanging down from the foramen of Luschka, and this is the glossopharyngeal nerve, which exits via the jugular foramen, and there's a dural septum in between the glossopharyngeal and the vagus nerve, and these are the spinelets of the cranial nerve 11th, and this is the cranial nerve 12th, which tends to arise from the lateral surface of the medulla. So furthermore, medially, if you're going to trace down, furthermore towards the cerebellar surface, if we trace down, so these are the foramen of Magendie, which is seen, and which is an access to the 4th ventricle, and we can see the cerebellar tonsils that are hanging down. This is again a lateral picture to give an orientation. So when we talk about the CP angle anatomy, what is important is that the CP angle harbors 3 major complexes. So we have an upper complex, we have a middle complex, and we have a lower complex. So the upper complex, every complex actually has a fissure, has its own vessel, has its own couple of nerves, and has the association with the portion of the brainstem. So the upper complex has midbrain, and the fissure that it's associated with is the cerebellomesencephalic fissure. As the name indicates, that it's a fissure between the midbrain and the cerebellum. The peduncle of the cerebellum that it harbors is basically the superior cerebellar peduncle. The surface of the cerebellum that is involved in forming the boundaries of the upper complex is the tentoral surface. The cranial nerve that it houses is basically cranial nerve 3, 4, and 6. The artery of the upper complex is the superior cerebellar artery, which is one of the terminal branches of the vertebral, as the two vertebrals join together to form the basilar. So the last artery that it usually gives off is the superior cerebellar artery, which tends to curve around the brainstem and then tends to supply the anterior surface and the tentoral surface of the cerebellum as well. Then we talk about the middle complex. So the middle complex has the vessel that is associated with the middle complex is the anterior-inferior cerebellar artery, which is popularly called as the ICA. And the ICA is associated with ICA is a branch of vertebral. So here we can trace down that this is the ICA in green, which is present here, and it's arising again from the vertebral. The nerve complexes that are seen in the middle complex include the cranial nerve 6, which is present at the base of the CP angle. And from the lateral surface, we have the 7th and 8th nerve complex, which lie in close proximity to each other. The fissure that is present is the cerebellopontine fissure, which means the fissure between the cerebellum and the pons. And the surface of the cerebellum that is involved is the petrosal surface. Then we have the lower complex, which includes the vessel pica, which is a branch of vertebral. Again, we can see that this is the vertebral and this is the vessel. Pica tends to form a loop around caudally and then comes down rostrally to supply the surface of the cerebellum. So this is the medulla, which is the portion of the brainstem that is associated with the lower complex. The nerve complex, the nerves that are involved are extending from 9th to 12th. And there is the inferior cerebellar peduncle, which is associated and forms the boundaries of the lower complex of the CP angle in this particular region. And the surface of the cerebellum that is associated with this particular portion is the suboccipital surface. So that is lies behind the occiput and below the occiput. So that is why it is called as the suboccipital surface. So this is to give a brief idea that what are the structures we tend to identify and what are the structures we tend to get and see in the different complexes of the CP angle and different portions of the CP angle. So this is okay. So this is a retrosigmoid view that we can see of the right-sided CP angle. So as we discussed earlier, so this is the lateral surface and this is the medial surface. So this is the flocculus of the cerebellum, which is slightly retracted, and we can appreciate that this is the cranial nerve 8th and cranial nerve 7 is hidden, which is anterior to it. So this we can trace down till the internal acoustic meatus, and there's dura over it. There is the branch of ICA, which is the labyrinthine artery that tends to travel over the surface of the 8th nerve complex. Also, we can appreciate the cranial nerve 5, which arises and which is present higher up in the complex, and we can appreciate the bunch of superior petrosal veins, which are usually present at the junction or the start of the root entry zone, usually present at the root entry zone of the trigeminal nerve from where it arises from the brainstem. We can also appreciate there are lower cranial nerves, that is the cranial nerve 9th and 10th, which are separated by a dural septum in between. So these couple of rootlets are basically the cranial nerve 10th, which is the vagus, and we can see that the cranial nerve 9th is present here. And we can see that the vertebral's branch, which is spica, tends to loop rostrally and then takes the caudal loop and turns to supply the medullary surface and suboccipital surface of the cerebellum. That's an extended view. In this particular picture, what we've done is that we have retracted the inferior vestibular nerve and the superior vestibular nerve so that you can appreciate the anteriorly lying cranial nerve 7th, because the cranial nerve 7th lies anterior in relationship to the cranial nerve 8th, basically. So we have the superior vestibular nerve and the cranial nerve 7th are separated from inferiorly from the cochlear and the inferior vestibular nerve by the presence of a transverse crest at the level of the internal acoustic meatus. Again, we can appreciate that this is the flocculus of the cerebellum, which tends to cover up and tends to hide the junction of these nerves where they're originating from the brainstem. So in order to appreciate their origin, we tend to retract this and we can appreciate then their origin furthermore medially. Again, this is the branch of, this is the ICA, which is tracing down and which is lying in close proximity to the 7th and 8th nerve complex, which is itself a branch of the vertebral. And here we can see the loop of the posterior inferior cerebellar artery, which tends to arise from the vertebral, then takes a rostral turn and then has a caudal turn and then tends to supply the surface of the medulla as well as the suboccipital surface of the cerebellum. So there are going to be, these are because the whole presentation primarily is comprising of different cadaveric pictures. So there's going to be slight repetition in order for people to have a gross understanding of what we are talking about. And because once we get the orientation of the anatomy correct, then we can tend to understand that what the disease is it's harboring. So these are going to be different sections where we are retracting certain things and then we are presenting others. So it's going to be a follow. So again, this is a retrosigmoid approach, and this is a retrosigmoid view that we can see. So we can appreciate that this is the cranial nerve 5, which is visualized here, which arises from the topmost part of the complex and from the brainstem, and this is the root entry zone that you can see. This is again the flocculus of the cerebellum, which is hiding the origin of the 7th 8th nerve complex from the brainstem. This is the cranial nerve 6th, which can be seen at the base and the apex of the cerebellopontine fissure and present anteriorly into the CP angle. We can appreciate that this is the anterior-inferior cerebellar artery, which is a branch itself of a vertebral artery, and it has two trunks, basically a caudal trunk and a rostral trunk. So the rostral trunk is usually the one that is associated with the hemifacial spasm as well, when it tends to irritate the cranial nerve 7. So, and here what we've cut down is that here you can see that the superior vestibular nerve and the inferior vestibular nerve, they have been cut down and transected in order to expose the anteriorly lying cranial nerve 7th and the cochlear nerve, because the cranial nerve 7th and the cochlear nerve, they tend to lie anterior to the superior and the inferior vestibular nerves. So superiorly, we have the superior vestibular nerve, and anterior to it lies the facial nerve, and inferiorly we have the cochlear nerve, which tends to lie anterior to the inferior vestibular nerve, which are both parts of the vestibulocochlear nerve. So, and this is the internal, this is the labyrinthine artery, which is a branch of ICA that tends to travel into the porous internal acoustic meatus. So we can trace both the nerves arising from the brainstem and then going laterally into the internal acoustic meatus. So this is the artery that travels with it. Then here we can appreciate the glossopharyngeal, which is part of the lower nerve complex. So when coming down to the fact of now, since we're going to elaborate a bit about the upper complex. So we're going to talk about the trigeminal nerve. So the dura has been removed from the lateral aspect of the Meckel's cave in order to appreciate and in order to make the understanding of the formation of the trigeminal node. So we can appreciate that the motor root of the trigeminal nerve tends to lie anteriorly, whereas the sensory root and rostrally as well, whereas the sensory root lies slightly posterior to it. These are the diffuse anastomosis of the sensory nerve root till they form the sensory nerve root ganglion of the cranial nerve 5 and in the Meckel's cave, and then the division of the cranial nerve 5 into V1, V2, and V3 respectively takes place. So this is the picture in which the dura has been removed, and we can appreciate now the posterior nerve root ganglion of the cranial nerve 5, which is lying here. And we can appreciate that the V1 division of the nerve tends to travel anteriorly and medially, whereas the V3 division tends to travel caudal and laterally. And we can see that the V2 division tends to exit in the intermediate fashion. So we know that the motor nerve roots of the cranial nerve 5, they usually arise in a pair of like 4 to 14, and they can have separate origin as well, like individual origin from the nerve root, and or they can arise as like a couple or a bundle, and then they tend to join further laterally to form the nerve itself. So this is the sensory root of the trigeminal nerve, and this is the motor root of the trigeminal nerve. And the cerebellar lip usually comes once we are approaching this particular portion, and we're viewing it from one side, that is in the retrosigmoid approach. So what we do is that usually a lip of the cerebellum and a portion of the cerebellum tends to hide the origin of the cranial nerve 5. So we have to retract that and then visualize its origin from the brainstem. This is another view showing the similar orientation. Then we have the relationships of the trigeminal nerve with the superior cerebellar artery. So because the major disease or the major issue that or the major problem that we encounter in the upper complex is usually the trigeminal neuralgia, for which the procedure is usually done. So the offending vessel in cases of trigeminal neuralgia is usually an SCA loop. Sometimes it could be an ICA loop, or sometimes it could be a tortuous basilar. But most frequent vessel that bothers the trigeminal is the superior cerebellar artery. So it's very important to understand the relationships of the superior cerebellar artery with the trigeminal nerve itself. So this is again a lateral view, as we can see, and the important part is that the dura over the Meckel's cave has been removed, and the vertebra cavernis has also been removed in order to expose these surfaces. So like we said, that this is the V1 division, which tends to travel interomedially, and this is the V3 division, which tends to travel caudolaterally, and the V2 division, which tends to be present in the intermediate fashion. This is the gross anastomosis of all the 3 nerve rootlets, and then this is the trigeminal nerve root, which is the dorsal root, and the motor root tends to lie more rostral and anterior to it. We see that this is the superior cerebellar artery, and there's the loop of superior cerebellar artery, which what happens is, like I discussed initially as well, that the superior cerebellar artery usually arises as we see basilar is going to be traversing over the anterior surface of the pons, which is slightly hidden over here. And once it traverses, so before it terminates, it tends to give off 2 branches on either side, which is the superior cerebellars of either. So those superior cerebellar arteries, they tends to curve around the brainstem, and then they take a very shallow curve or a shallow loop which tends to sometimes irritate and sometimes cause problems to the dorsal root of the trigeminal nerve, and that can be a causative agent for trigeminal neuralgia in most of the cases. So usually the loop of the SCA tends to lie in the superior aspect and sometimes in the superior lateral aspect as well, superior medial aspect of the nerve as well. And also the venous anatomy is also important, which can be a causative agent in cases of trigeminal neuralgia. As we can see that this is a bunch of petrosal venous signs, petrosal veins that are present just at the root entry zone of the trigeminal nerve. So these could be the offending vessels as well. Rest, we can appreciate that the sixth cranial nerve lies at the base, and this is the cavernous sinus that we can trace down laterally, and this is the superior petrosal vein and the inferiorly lying ICA, which is could be one of the causes in few cases. Again, we can appreciate the blue as we're talking about the superior cerebellar artery. So we have now we can appreciate that this is the superior cerebellar artery. So we said the superior cerebellar artery usually has a rostral trunk and a caudal trunk. So this is the superior cerebellar artery's rostral trunk, and this is the caudal trunk, which can be traced down here. So the offending loop in this case is basically the. Give me a minute. Yeah. So yes. So we can appreciate that this is the basilar, and as it gives rise to the superior cerebellar artery. So this is the cerebellar trunk. This is the rostral trunk that can be seen, and this is the caudal trunk of the superior cerebellar artery. And we can see that this is the rostral trunk, which is causing the compression over the fifth cranial nerve and is coming in contact with the dorsal nerve root. Now again, we can see that the lip of the cerebellum has been retracted in order to appreciate the root entry zone and the origin of the fifth cranial nerve. This is the vessel ICA, which is a branch of the vertebral, and it lies again in close proximity to the seventh, eighth nerve complex. So, and tends to travel in between sometimes and sometimes inferiorly, and then takes the rostral turn. Then we can appreciate that this is the superior petrosal sinus, which forms and which has been the dura has been exposed in order to make the relations here clear. Another view, which is again showing that this is the superior cerebellar artery and then has a bilateral, furthermore, medial bifurcation. So the medial bifurcation is then this is causing the rostral trunk of the superior cerebellar artery, and this is the inferior trunk of the superior cerebellar artery. So in this case, this is the caudal trunk or the inferior trunk which is causing the trouble, and this is the superior petrosal veins that are present here just at the junction of the root entry zone. So this is to give a brief idea that how the vascular loops and the vascular branches basically cause problems to the nerve and why it is important and how to dissect it. So when you talk about the middle neurovascular complex, so we're done with the upper complex, now we come to the middle neurovascular complex. So the middle neurovascular complex, like we discussed initially, says about ICA. So the vessel is basically anterior inferior cerebellar artery. The surface that is involved is the pons and the middle cerebellar peduncle. Like we said, it is the fissure that it's going to be harboring is going to be the cerebellopontine fissure. The surface of the cerebellum is going to be the petrosal surface, and the nerve complexes will be the abducent, facial, and the vestibulocochlear nerve, which is the sixth, seventh, and the eighth nerves. So we all know that the ICA tends to arise at the pontine level, and it poses in relationship to the seventh and eighth and the sixth cranial nerve to reach the surface of the middle cerebellar peduncle, where it tends to course in the cerebellopontine fissure because it takes a rostral turn and then comes down caudally to then terminate and supply the petrosal surface of the cerebellum, like we saw in multiple slides. So this is the suprameatal variant of the retrosigmoid approach. So suprameatal variant is basically that there is an this is an internal acoustic meatus, like we can see, because this is the cranial nerve 8th, which is seen exiting into the or entering into the internal acoustic meatus. So suprameatal tubercle is basically a bony landmark which is lying just superior to the internal acoustic meatus. So that is why it is called as suprameatal variant of the retrosigmoid approach. So we are going to, in order to provide further view and enhanced view of the origin. So what we do is, and to add further like 1.5 centimeters of the origin of the cranial nerve 5, we can drill down the suprameatal tubercle, and we can appreciate its origin from the all the way from the brainstem, and then we can sometimes, if required, we can access it there. So here we can see that this is the superior cerebellar artery, which is again lying in very close proximity to the cranial nerve 5. This is the superior petrosal vein, which is coming down, and this is the ICA, which is again lying in close, which is coming again as a branch of the vertebral, having a rostral turn and a caudal turn. So this is the rostral loop, which is the proximal loop, and which is now exiting and entering into the internal acoustic meatus with the cranial nerve 8. And this is its caudal loop, like we can appreciate, which is traversing after looping around the cranial nerve 8. It's coming down. And this is the flocculus of the cerebellum. This is the cranial nerve 9th and 10th, which are separated by a dural septum in between. Then after entering into the jugular foramen. So now after this is the same picture, same view, but now the superior petrosal vein has been divided so that the suprameatal tubercle becomes prominent. And in the next picture, we're going to drill this tubercle, and then you can appreciate the origin of the cranial nerve 5 much better. So the dura has been removed with the suprameatal tubercle here. And after drilling of the suprameatal tubercle, we can appreciate that our origin of the cranial nerve 5 is basically much more visualized, and it adds to 1 centimeter furthermore medial that we can trace down the nerve, and the anteriorly lying clivus as well. And this is then the lateral, as it then laterally exits into the Meckel's cave and forms the root. So this is the suprameatal approach to the posterior part of the Meckel's cave, like we were saying, and this is the right-sided CP angle, as we can appreciate. So this is suprameatal tubercle is lying here. We see that the suprameatal tubercle is present just above the internal acoustic meatus, and this is the cranial nerve 5. This is cranial nerve 8, which is exiting into the internal acoustic meatus. This is labyrinthine artery, which is traversing on its surface. So once we are going to drill this particular portion, so then our exposure for both the nerves becomes much more clearer. And yeah, so again, this suprameatal tubercle has been removed and drilled off, so we can appreciate that the cranial nerve 5 is the proximal origin of the cranial nerve 5 is much more clear, and this is the tentorial surface, like we can appreciate, and this is the cranial nerve 8th and 7th, which is lying anterior to it, and this is cranial nerve 6, which is again, as we were talking about, it's present in the base of the CP angle. Now, those were the lateral views which we were seeing. Now, this is the superior view of the suprameatal tubercle, as we're seeing. So, in the superior view, what we have that the tubercle has been removed. The tubercle. Yeah. So the suprameatal tubercle can be appreciated. We can appreciate that there's this is the cranial nerve 5, which is lying again. The suprameatal tubercle tends to lie between the cranial nerve 5 and cranial nerve 8, and just above the internal acoustic meatus. This is the superior petrosal vein, which is present at the junction, and this is the cranial 7th 8th nerve complex, which can be seen from the top as we are visualizing, and this is the pontine surface we can see. So these are the vessels that are running in close proximity to the brainstem. This is the portion of the cerebellum which has been retracted so that the vessels can be seen, and this is the choroid plexus, which is hanging down from the foramen of Luschka. So this was a superior view of the suprameatal tubercle in order to identify and make it clear how lateral it is. And once we drill that portion, so we can appreciate the medial aspect and medial origin of the nerves more clearly. This is again a lateral view after the removal of the tubercle itself. So the tubercle has been removed. This is so the cranial nerve 5 portion has been visualized better. This is superior petrosal sinus, and the cranial nerve 6, 7th and 8th exiting into the internal or entering into the internal acoustic meatus. Then we have again the facial nerve exposure. So as we talked about initially, that the facial nerve tends to lie anteriorly, and they both are separated by a transverse crest. So we can see that the cranial nerve 7th is lying slightly anterior to the cranial nerve 8th, and this is we are looking from the posterior aspect basically. Now, the cranial nerve 8th has been elevated in order to clearly appreciate the cranial nerve 7th, and we can see that the ICA is lying in close proximity to the 7th 8th nerve complex as it is exiting into the entering into the internal acoustic meatus. This is a picture which is showing the flocculus of the cerebellum and which is hiding the origin and tends to hide and protect the junction of the cranial nerve 7th and 8th from the brainstem. And this is the choroid plexus which is hanging from the foramen of Pushka. This is the rhomboid lobe of the cerebellum that can be seen. This is the inferior nerve complex that we can appreciate with the cranial nerve 9, 10th, which both are separated by a dural septum and exiting into the jugular foramen. Again, a similar picture. Then the dural septum has been removed in between the cranial nerve 9th and 10th. So cranial nerve 9th tends to be lying anteriorly and cranial nerve 10th tends to lie slightly posterior. And they're both divided by a dural septum and the jugular foramen. This is the branches of the pica that are running in close proximity to cranial nerve 9th and 10th. And these accessory nerve rootlets are the rootlets of the cranial accessory nerve. Again, a similar picture providing similar information. Now, this was the concept that I wanted to tell. So once we are going to remove the posterior wall of the internal acoustic meatus, we are tracing the nerve now towards the internal acoustic meatus. So this is what we're going to see. So the dura here is intact. Both the nerves, once they've existed from the brainstem, now they're going to be entering into the internal acoustic meatus. So this is this superior vestibular nerve and the inferior vestibular nerve, and we know that the 7th cranial nerve tends to lie anterior to it. So this is the dural covering that is present, and once its dural covering has been removed, so this is the crest that I was talking about initially, that the transverse crest tends to separate the 7th and the superior vestibular nerve in superiorly, and inferior to the transverse crest lies the cochlear and the inferior vestibular nerve. So the 7th nerve and the cochlear nerve tends to have a further anterior orientation, whereas the superior and the inferior vestibular nerve, they tend to lie posteriorly. So this is an enlarged view showing the similar picture and similar concept. Here we can see that the cleavage plane has been established by separating the superior vestibular nerve medially and then coming down, tracing it down laterally in order to expose the 7th cranial nerve, which tends to lie anteriorly in relationship to the 8th cranial nerve. This is the orientation of the semicircular canals. So we have the superior and the posterior semicircular canal, and they have a common crus which is present as the nerve is entering into the internal acoustic meatus. So this is again, there's a vertical crest that tends to separate the facial and the superior vestibular nerve. This is again a similar picture showing us the orientation of the 7th 8th nerve complex when it is exiting and from the internal acoustic meatus and then traveling into the superior and the posterior semicircular canals, whereas the cranial nerve 9th, as it is exiting, this is going to be the jugular foramen. So we can appreciate that the jugular bulb of the internal jugular vein can be seen here. So cranial nerve 9th and 10th are separated by a dural septum, which can be seen in this particular picture. So this is once only the layer of bone is intact. So that is showing that this is a vertical crest that tends to separate the facial area from the superior vestibular area. There is a transverse crest that tends to separate the superior vestibular nerve and the facial nerve from the inferiorly lying cochlea and the inferior vestibular nerve. So this is again a schematic diagram to clear down this concept. So it's a view of right-sided internal acoustic meatus, and we can appreciate that this is the superiorly lying superior vestibular nerve. It lies slightly superior posterior, and facial nerve tends to lie anterior superior, and the cochlear nerve tends to lie again anterior inferior, and this inferior vestibular nerve tends to lie inferior posterior, and they both are separated in the midline by a transverse crest, which is a bony landmark at the level of the internal acoustic canal. So we are going to be seeing anterolateral views of the right-sided CP angle. So these are now schematic pictures in order to just have a quick revision of what we saw on earlier. So this is like we're seeing that now we're talking about that these are the anterolateral views. So they're not like completely lateral, which is looking slightly from an anterior and lateral aspect. So we can see the anterior surface of the pons here and the inferior anterior surface of the medulla. So we can see the olives of the medulla here, and we can appreciate the origin if we start from the topmost nerve complexes. So we can see that the cranial nerve 5, which is the trigeminal nerve, tends to arise from the pons, and this is the superior medulla limb of the cerebellopontine fissure, the fissure that was existing between the two spaces, that is the petrosal surface of the cerebellum and the pons itself, and this is the inferior surface as it is curving around the pons to form this, and this angular space that that harbors so many important and vital structures. So this angular space is called as CP angle. So this is the cranial nerve 5, and then it goes on laterally to exit into the metascape. And then this is the middle cerebellar peduncle, which is again lying in very close proximity to the 7th-8th nerve complex. We can see that the 7th-8th nerve complex tend to arise from the cerebellopontine fissure towards this inferior at the nearby the inferior limb. And this is the flocculus of the cerebellum that tends to hide and that tends to curve forward, and in order to hide its origin of the nerves, it tends to obliterate the vision of the origin of these nerves. Choroid plexus can be seen again hanging down from the foramen of Luschka, which is again an lateral opening into the fourth ventricle. We can then inferior complex can be appreciated here. That is the cranial nerve 9th, which is the glossopharyngeal nerve separated by a dural septum. Then the cranial nerve 10th as they enter into the jugloforamen. This is the cranial nerve 11th, which is the spinal accessory nerve, which tends to arise from the olivomedullary sulcus, and the cranial nerve 12th, which is going to be present further more anteriorly in the form of these rootlets, as we can see. And deeper down to it, they are going their origin can be traced deeper down to it, their levels of the hypoglossal triangle, which is present in the base of the fourth ventricle. As we talk about the arterial relationship, so we said the complex, the upper complex has the vessel that is the superior cerebellar artery. So once the superior, this is the basilar, which is running on the anterior surface of the pons. So it gives off the superior cerebellar artery, tends to curve around the brainstem and tends to then supply, and has a rostral and a caudal trunk, and tends to supply the tentorial surface of the cerebellum and portion of the midbrain, and has this, as we can see here, that this trunk tends to have a relationship with the trigeminal nerve. So this is the caudal trunk and this is the rostral trunk in this particular case, where we can see that this is caudal trunk tends to take a shallow curve just at the origin of the trigeminal nerve. We can also see that we have origin of the ICA from the vertebral, which is again divided into the rostral and the caudal trunks, and the rostral trunk tends to take a superior loop, then tends to curve around the 7th-8th nerve complex, and then tends to exit over the middle cerebellar peduncle and tends to supply the petrosal surface of the cerebellum. We can see that the posterior and inferior cerebellar artery arises from the vertebral, and before traveling down and providing arterial supply to the medullary surface as well as the suboccipital surface of the cerebellum, it tends to first course superiorly and then takes the inferior turn in relationship to the 9th and 10th nerve complex. So the venous relationships are again important here. We can see that the superior petrosal vein lies in close proximity to the 5th cranial nerve, and then we have veins of the cerebellopontine fissure and the medial and the interior mesencephalic veins as well, pontomesencephalic veins, which are going to be supplying the anterior surface of the pons and the middle cerebellar peduncle, which take the venous drainage from there. And then there are veins of the pontomedullary sulcus, which are going to be lying between the pons and the medulla, which take the venous drainage from the surface of the pons as well as the medulla, and then drains down via the inferior limb. And we can see that this is the retroolivary sulcus, which is so this is the vein which is running in the retroolivary sulcus. So this is the retroolivary sulcus vein. This is the lateral medullary vein that we can see, which is running on the lateral surface of the medulla. Then there is a medial anterior medullary vein, which is running on the anterior surface of the medulla, just in the midline. And then there is a transverse medullary vein, which is basically going to be coursing from the anterior surface to the lateral surface and then going on to medially. So when you talk, this was about the middle neurovascular complex, and we have the lower neurovascular complex, which is related to the pica and includes the medulla, inferior cerebellar peduncle, cerebellomedullary fissure, suboccipital surface of the cerebellum, and the lower four cranial nerves. The pica tends to arise at the medullary level, like we said, from the vertebral artery. It encircles the medulla, passes in relationship, takes a rostral turn, then comes down and loops down in relationship to the 9th, 10th, and the spinal accessory nerves to reach the surface of the inferior cerebellar peduncle, as well as the where it is going to then dip down into the cerebellomedullary fissure, the fissure between the cerebellum and the medulla, and it's going to then terminate by supplying the suboccipital surface of the cerebellum. So we know now we need to just have a brief view of the origin. So the glossopharyngeal nerve, the vagus, and the spinal accessory, and the hypoglossal nerve, they tend to arise from the medulla, like we discussed, along the margin of the inferior olive. And they all tend to arise as a line of fruitlets that are exiting the brainstem along the posterior edge of the olive in the post-olivary sulcus, like we saw in the initial pictures, which is a shallow groove between the olives and the posterior lateral surface of the medulla. So the hypoglossal nerve itself is seen arising as a line of fruitlets that are exiting the brainstem along the anterior margin of the lower 2/3 of the olive and the pre-olivary sulcus, which is a groove between the olives and the medullary pyramid. So the hypoglossal nerve has a relatively anterior orientation as compared to the 9th, 10th, and the 11th cranial nerves. The hypoglossal nerve tends to be exiting from the inferior portion, that is the lower 2/3 of the olives, and it tends to arise from the pre-olivary sulcus, which is basically present between the olives and the medullary pyramids. Whereas the 9th, 10th, and the 11th nerves, they tend to arise from the post-olivary sulcus, which is a groove between the posterolateral surface of the medulla and the olives. Okay. So the rootlets of the hypoglossal, they tend to form a line that is again continuous inferiorly with the line along which the ventral spinal roots tend to arise. And these rootlets are usually arising in a nucleus, obviously, whose rostral part sits, like I discussed initially, deep to the hypoglossal triangle, which is lying in the floor of the fourth ventricle. And they tend to then exit along the anterior aspect of the medulla. Hypoglossal nerve rootlets, they course anterolateral through the subarachnoid space, and they pass behind the vertebral usually to reach the hypoglossal canal, and that is why the 12th cranial nerve lies in very close proximity to the vertebral artery. So we have to be sure when we're operating. Now, after we've done, this was a brief review. I know CP angle is a very extensive topic, but I tried to make it understandable by just breaking it down into 3 nerve complexes and neurovascular complexes. So that was a brief about the anatomy. Now we're going to talk a bit about surgery, but surgery, we're going to just discussing the retrosigmoid approach, because the retrosigmoid approach is the workhorse approach of the CP angle. Secondly, it's the most common, and we can actually address multiple lesions via this approach in majority of the cases. So if you're clear with the concept of anatomy, I think it is very easy. So this is a direct view of the application of the brain spatula when we're addressing different nerve complex. So like we can appreciate that the retractor is just placed in the midline. So with here, by placing the retractor just at the right angles, we are just trying to visualize the middle neurovascular complex. The picture B is basically slightly oriented superiorly. So when we want to address the cranial nerve 5, we tend to be retracting the cerebellum slightly superiorly. And if we want to address the lower cranial nerves, so then we tend to retract the cerebellum from the inferior aspect in order to make ourselves clear about the origin of the 9th to 12th cranial nerves. So we all know that now we're going to be discussing the relationship of the foramen of Luschka and the lateral recess of the fourth ventricle to the junction of the facial and the eighth cranial nerves with the brainstem, as we are going to visualize it through a suboccipital craniotomy. So we can see in the inset picture that is a characteristic incision of a retrosigmoid craniotomy. This is the side, the dotted line indicates the craniectomy site that we can see. So this is lying just posterior to the mastoid, and it tends to extend. How far superior and how far inferior we're going to extend depends upon the fact that which neurovascular complex we have to address. So if we were going to work towards the superior aspects, so obviously our incision is going to be more superior and less inferiorly, but it's always fixed with the 5 mm medial approach to the mastoid. And if you're going to be working down, so then our incision is going to be more inferiorly located in the same setting. So this is an inset picture which is showing the neurovascular orientation. And here we can see that this is again a lateral view. And we can see that the cerebellum has been, this is the surface of the cerebellum, and this is an anterolateral view, like we can see. But why? Because this is the pyramid of the cerebellum, which we're going to see once the patient is lying slightly like prone or semi-lateral. So we can appreciate the cerebellar tonsils, and we can appreciate the foramen of Magendie, which is the central foramen of the entry of the fourth ventricle into the floor of the fourth ventricle. As we see here, this is the orientation of the brainstem. So this is topmost. We have the pons. We can see that this is the flocculus, which tends to hide the junction of the origin of the 7th-8th nerve complex. And just beneath the flocculus is the presence of the foramen of Luschka, which as the choroid plexus is seen hanging down from it. This is the cranial nerve 7th and 8th complex, which is then exiting into the internal acoustic meatus. We can appreciate that from, as we were talking about, that the 9th, 10th, and the 11th cranial nerve, they tend to exit from the post-delivery sulcus, which is going to be present in between the olives and the posterolateral surface of the medulla. So this is the origin of the 9th and the 10th cranial nerve, where they're going to be then separated by a presence of a dural septum as they exit from the jugular foramen. And this is the 12th cranial nerve, which tends to arise further anteriorly in between the pre-olivary sulcus, which is going to be present in between the two pyramids of the medulla. These are the anterior superior views. So this is now the neural relationships after the cerebrum as well as the tentorium cerebelli has been removed. So again, anterior view, pons, medulla, intermedullary. This is the intermedullary sulcus, which we can see from the lateral surface of the pontomedullary sulcus. We can see the origin of the cranial nerve 11th and the 10th and the 9th cranial nerve. And this is the 7th-8th nerve complex, which is arising from the cerebellopontine fissure. This is the petrosal surface of the cerebellum, and this is the occipital surface of the cerebellum, which is lying just posterior to the medulla. This is the flocculus of the cerebellum, which tends to hide the origin of the 7th-8th nerve complex. And this is the exiting portion that the 7th-8th nerve complex tends to exit into the internal acoustic meatus. 9th, 10th cranial nerve, they tend to be exiting into the jugular foramen. So this is the dural septum that is separating both superior and inferior, superiorly the 9th cranial nerve and inferiorly the 10th cranial nerve. And this is the spinal accessory nerve, which tends to exit along with the vagus usually, and cranial nerve 12th, which tends to exit via the hypoglossal canal. And these are the arterial relationships, again, anterior superior view. So this is the basilar artery. These are the two vertebrae which are going to join, form a confluence, and basilar, which is going to be running over the anterior surface of the pons ica, either arising as a branch of the basilar or sometimes as a branch of the vertebral, tends to loop inferiorly, then superiorly takes a caudal turn and forms a rostral and a caudal trunk before it terminates to supply the middle cerebral peduncle and the petrosal surface. Again, present usually in between the 7th, 8th nerve complex. Sometimes the origin of the nerve can be disturbed and can be irritated by a rostral root of the ica. Then we have the posterior inferior cerebellar artery, which is a branch of the vertebral. So before it, after arising from the vertebral artery, it's going to course around the medulla, encircles the medulla, and then takes the rostral turn in relationship to the 9th, 10th cranial nerves, and then tend to take the caudal turn in order to supply and terminate into the suboccipital surface of the cerebellum. The venous relationships, again, a very quick and brief review, as we are going to see. So this is the superior petrosal vein, which is again lying in close proximity to the fifth cranial nerve. Then we have the veins of the cerebellopontine fissure, which are going to be traversing in the superior and the inferior limbs. Then we have the medullary veins, which are going to be transverse medullary veins, which tend to encircle the medulla. We have the medial medullary vein and the lateral medullary vein, which is going to be running in between the olivomedullary sulcus. And we have the veins of the cerebellum medullary fissure, which are going to be lying inferiorly. So this is the complete venous drainage of the CP angle. Then we have a posterior view. So like we usually see via when we are performing a retrosigmoid, so that's the dural hitches. If circular cranectomy as has been done, and we can see that the retractor has been placed and the cerebellum has been retracted. So the superior limb has been retracted to expose the origin of the pons and the fifth cranial nerve. We can see the flocculus of the cerebellum, which has been retracted and peeping through, and foramen of Luschka, from which hangs down the choroid plexus. And there is inferiorly lying lower cranial nerves, and medially we have in the middle complex we have the seventh, eighth cranial nerve. It can be appreciated. So once we retract, first nerve usually to encounter is the seventh, eighth cranial nerve complex. And for the fifth cranial nerve, because it lies slightly anterior and the surface of the cerebellum is usually curling around to it, so we need to place the retractor slightly superior and laterally in order to expose its origin. Then the arterial relationships, as we discussed in the anterior superior view. So this is a lateral view, like we can see, and we usually encounter. So this is the basilar that can be seen running along the anterior surface. This is the superior cerebellar artery, just lying superior to the fifth cranial nerve. This is the loops of the ICA, which are arising from the vertebral and as part of basilar. This is the rostral trunk of the ICA. This is the caudal trunk of the ICA, as we can trace. And then this is the pica vertebral artery, and this is origin of the pica from the vertebral as it's circling around the brainstem and lying in close proximity to the 10th and the 9th cranial nerve complex. This is an enlarged view of the same picture. These are the neural relationships like we've discussed. Thank you. Any questions? Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Afifa, for this nice lecture, and in detail it was. Anyone want to ask something for Dr. Afifa? If there is any question about the lecture, ask Dr. Afifa. I think it was a very nice lecture, Dr. Afifa, and it was in details. So we're very thankful for you, and we will meet in another lecture, inshallah.
Thank you.
You are
It was
welcome.
really nice presentation. Very nice presentation. It cleared many concepts, and you should share it with everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Afia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.